What's up, everybody? Got another episode of the Common Grounds podcast today, and I got a special guest, our first faculty member on the podcast, Dr. Luís González. Professor González, thank you so much for joining me. It really means a lot.
You're welcome.
My favorite Spanish professor by far. I've been writing a thesis with you, and also from Colombia, my favorite country I've ever been to outside of the United States. So please, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're from and how you ended up at Wake Forest? I know it's kind of a loaded question, but it'd be awesome.
So I am from Colombia, from a small town near Medellín. I went to college in Medellín. I have been asked, how did I end up at Wake Forest? And the answer is, I did my homework. So I guess I was prepared when the opportunity presented itself. I was having coffee in a little coffee house in Colombia over Christmas, and a second cousin approached me. He knew that I had studied some English. Mm-hmm. So he asked me, would you be interested in doing a master's in the United States? And I said, hell yes. and then he said that he was doing master work or PhD work on computer science. Oh, wow. At West Virginia University, and he said, there are a number of folks there from all over the world. They are teaching assistants. He explained to me what a teaching assistant was, and he said they teach a couple of courses, and you earn an stipend, and you go for free to the university. Are you interested in that? And I said, hell yes, I am. So he sent me a package with the information, which is, I would say, like a pound of paperwork. I sat down with a dictionary, went through the whole thing. Wow. So the coffee thing, the meeting was in December, and I sent my papers, and I suppose by April I was accepted to West Virginia University, and in August I was at West Virginia University. A mountaineer. Yes, that's how I got here.
But the mountains aren't as big as they are in Antioquia, though. They're a lot
Well,
smaller.
It is. You know, the thing is that you sort of appreciate what you have, mm-hmm. and you take the best. So we enjoyed West Virginia. Right. I married my girlfriend at the time, and we came together. And we had a good time at West Virginia. We worked like crazy, but we had a good time. We were being in West Virginia. We were able to. The university is gorgeous, mm-hmm. and we made good friends. And being in West Virginia, we were able to go to Washington and New York on trips for a couple of days, and we enjoyed the beauty of West Virginia. So we remember. From West Virginia, we remember the good people,
Mount Mama,
and the
country roads,
and the beauty and everything. The town where the university is, there is a river, and it's the Monongahela River, and I thought that was a pretty word to know. So we have good memories of the university.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Now, what was the process like getting the visa to come? Was it a J1? What was the when you came to?
It was no, it was not the J1.
Not the O1. It would have been H1B. Maybe?
H1B. So I went to I got the papers from the university, and when we went to the consular office or the embassy in Bogota, I was at the time in Medellín. Mm-hmm. So I went with my wife, and we walked there with this pile of papers, and the counselor kind of looked at the papers and looked at us, and he was from New York. He told us that he was from New York, but that he had been to West Virginia. So he said, you want to go to West Virginia? You like boredom. And I don't remember what we said. I guess we said, we don't know anything better. We are very excited to go, and we got the visa and came here to do the master's for 2 years. When I was finishing the master's, I began receiving invitations to go for the PhD from a good few universities, Georgetown, USC, the Ohio State University. And I ended up going to the University of California, Davis, because it was a new program. The professor called me directly to invite me and tell me that that they were sort of starting this program. And I also went to visit with some friends to serendipitously to Georgetown. The problem with Georgetown was that the money was not enough. But at UC Davis, we were able to live with that money. So that was a
Big deal.
a big deal. That was a great deal.
Great deal.
And one of the stories is that when we told our friends that we were going to California, to UC Davis, they would say, "Oh, it's like a different country."
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, it cannot be. We got there, and yes, it is a different country. But nothing against West Virginia.
Nothing against West Virginia.
So we enjoyed our time at West Virginia. Actually, when I was at Wake, we went a couple of times to Northern Ohio to spend Thanksgiving with friends. And I remember that in one of those trips, we stopped by West Virginia. We showed our two children where we live when we were students there. And we looked for some people. We didn't find them because we didn't want to spend too much time there, not to get too late. But I have good memories of West Virginia. And actually, in later conversations with another graduate student, he told me that he had been very successful at his program at University of Georgia, and said, we were well prepared. West Virginia prepared us well for graduate school. And I can say the same about myself. When I see people from West Virginia, I get excited.
Yeah.
And I had good memories of that. We have also very good memories from UC Davis, because UC Davis is a bucolic and a gorgeous little town.
Yeah.
And the university is very good. So we had a good time. Just to give the whole trip from UC Davis, I got a position at UNC Chapel Hill.
Oh, wow.
So we drove across the country. Back again to the East Coast. Our daughter was 17 months old, and we rented a little truck and pulled our little automobile behind. And I remember that we left Davis at 5 in the morning, and we came through Death Valley because we kind of figured the route and stuff. There was a miscalculation. We were entering Death Valley at 12 noon. But we didn't think of that. So we begin going through Death Valley, and there is a part in Death Valley where you go up to Reno or somewhere in Nevada. I guess the tri-state region. And when we were going up, the truck heated up. I knew enough not to panic, but the point is that we were going up only 5 miles an hour because you couldn't go faster. And we did that. At the end of the evening, we were sort of in the desert and saying this was the time when we had a paper map. There was no GPS, so we didn't know exactly how close or not we were from a hotel. So it was a little scary, but we made it out. And I remember that we got to a little town or a little community with a couple of motels around 7 p.m. And we breathed with relief because it was a little scary. Now it's probably very different, but it was a little scary to be there. So we were very thankful for that. I was at Chapel Hill 5 years, and from Chapel Hill I came to Wake Forest in 1997, wow. 24 years ago, and loved it. I didn't know when I came to the interview at Wake, I didn't know that Wake was so prestigious.
Yeah.
And here I am. I loved it. I love it.
Awesome. It's grown a lot. One of the things that I wanted to ask, it seems like the car has been a great method of transportation around the United States for you, but let's take it back to when you went from Medellín Antioquia region to Bogota, did you fly when you went to the consulate, or did you drive? Because I know that drive through the mountains can be crazy if you are to drive that. So how did you get from hometown to the embassy before you were able to get approved to go to the West Virginia? Do you remember?
I do. So flying was an option, but what happens is that if I were to put it in dollars, flying from Medellin to Bogota would have cost us $200. And so we were young students, and we were counting every dollar or every peso, and so we decided to ride a bus because it was
That's
a
a
lot
crazy
cheaper.
drive. It's very,
Well, we were in
the mountains.
through the mountains, but you are not if you are not driving, you are fine. Actually, public transportation has its advantages.
Definitely.
If you are driving all that distance, it's kind of your responsibility, and if there is something wrong, it's your responsibility. But the beauty of public transportation is that I actually remember that we took a bus in the evening, so the drive was through the night. We slept through the night, and we got to Bogota in the morning. And the calculation for a young person is, instead of paying $200 for a flight, you pay $20 to $40 right by.
That's way
And
better.
and actually that was I had just married my wife, so taking a little trip with your wife
Exciting.
is nice. It was nice. So that was not a big deal. Actually, I have to tell you, later on, when we visit, we had to go and get the visa renewed, and we almost went through with the bus, public transportation, because that was a way of saving. My calculation is as if we are in the bus, we are sort of making the money that we would have to pay for the flight. And for a student and for any person, that's
You feel good about it.
I mean, you feel good about it, and it is like you save a good chunk of money if you can do that.
Yeah.
Now in the United States, it's you need a whole week to go from the East Coast to the West Coast, and that might not be a reasonable option unless you are going to visit someone and you are going with good company, and then you take the trip as a way of doing that.
Yeah.
Actually, when we moved from UC Davis to Chapel Hill, renting the little truck saved us a lot in the expenses, and we took advantage of the planning to come through a good few places, and we enjoyed most of the trip. We had a 17 months old child, and she got a little.
It can be a little tough.
A little tougher time, but we had games, and we planned stops at parks, and we had a cooler with the staff, and also had a good dinner, at least a good dinner during the day, and then eat out of the cooler. So it is all about sort of planning. And again, going back to the question of you came to West Virginia. There is good people everywhere, and there are good things everywhere. And by the way, you make the best out of it.
Yes.
You are at Wake Forest, you make the best out of it. You have to teach at UNC Pembroke, you make the best out of it. And maybe use that time at Pembroke to go to the next place. I remember one of the provosts here who was Jill Tiffenthaler. She was, I knew when I met her, I knew that she was here on her way to something better, because you could tell that she was an ambitious person. Sure enough, she was provost for 2 or 3 years and went from Wake Forest to, I believe, Colorado College, which is comparable to Wake Forest in Colorado, as the president. Wow. So I was totally right about them. When I landed at Wake Forest, not at the beginning, because I had other other plans. But after a few years, I thought to myself, this is a good place. I wouldn't mind.
It's a family. Huh?
It's the family.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind kind of making my life here and dying here. Why not?
Yeah.
Going to the eternal rest here.
Speaking of family, I had a question. Was it ever, I know your children speak Spanish, obviously. Was it ever a question not to teach them, or did you always want them to be bilingual? That's something that a lot of people who come to the United States face, of the choice whether to maintain that native language or not. How was that, or was it never even a thought?
No, as a linguist, I knew. And I know that some parents believe that a second language is going to mess up your kid. The learning, sort of juggling two languages, take the children a little, slow them down a little bit. But actually our purpose was that we would speak at home. And we knew that when they were going to school, they will pick it up. Mm-hmm. And our daughter went to kindergarten or first. Actually, she might not have gone to kindergarten. I don't remember exactly. Or she did, or first grade. And she was put in English for a second language. But that was not because she needed it, but because education, that's some stuff that is not smart. Mm-hmm. She didn't really need it. Mm-hmm. Okay, now back to the question, we knew that we would be speaking and reading and listening to music, and they will become bilingual.
That's amazing.
And they are not, and they were not going to be messed up. Yeah. I could tell that they were a little slow with the English, but they were picking up Spanish, and they more than compensated for that. I was awake when my daughter was in high school in the last 2 years. And she had a better education than me. Mm-hmm. When my children were in elementary school, I remember seeing Worldly Wise and say, oh my God, this is really a purposeful and good program for teaching the language and teaching children reading and vocabulary without the list, more like the practice and stuff. And I said, I wish I had that. I had that because I didn't have that good schooling when I was in Colombia. Mm-hmm. And then I say this because when my daughter was in the last 2 years of high school, she was in the newspaper. Mm-hmm. And I would read her stuff, not to proofread her, but because I wanted to. And I said, and I thought to myself, I don't remember whether I told her, I probably did. I said, oh my God, you write better than me. Mm. And for a college professor, a linguist, telling his high school student,
it's a major compliment,
that they write very well, that's very rewarding. Mm-hmm. And then my daughter was in journalism, and that helped her a lot. Mm-hmm. And then my son also went through journalism, and I am proud to say, for example, that they never asked me to proofread, to read a paper in college. Wow! Because they knew too that there was no cheating in college, and they would let me the stuff because I said I want to read it, not because I want to correct it or anything. They will read it. They would let me read it after, and I would compliment them. I remember telling my daughter, because she said at one time that my son was smarter than her, and I said, "What? You are smarter?" And she said, "No, Daddy, Andres is smarter than me." And I had not kind of realized that, because Andres was a little slower with the writing, but he got there too.
Wow. Yes. So speaking of reading, writing, correcting, all of that great stuff, you have your own books, and I think that your books are something that will be a big contribution to society, and they need to catch on quickly. And I was hoping you could talk about, I know you could talk along about them, but basically just a brief overview of what's in the books, how it pertains to grammar, and I think that contribution to learning, contribution to education that has a lot to do with citizenship, because so much of citizenship has to do with education, government education, things like that. And I think what you've done in your book and what I've read in your class makes language learning, second language learning, and first language learning incredibly easy with verbal, verbato, verb e. And I was hoping you could talk about the fundamentally simple logic of language and the four dichotomies of Spanish, which everyone should get at, and how that process was.
Short answer, it is sort of a work done with love. So the story of these books is that I decided to become a linguist we don't have. I guess I'm gonna stick to the script here. But when I began teaching languages in college as a graduate student, I realized that the rules there was a lot of redundancy and repetitions in the rule. So I kind of began to compress them, to fuse them, to avoid the repetition, and to present them to the student in a little smarter way. So what happens is that I propose in my books, I kind of figured out in my dissertation that subject, direct object, and indirect object is not how we process language. And by the way, those notions go to Greek. They were proposed about 200 years before Jesus Christ, before our era. So they are about 21 centuries old. And so in the teaching, I began to connecting the dots. And so what I have written is I connecting the dots. So the idea is that as speakers, we are not processing or computing subject, direct object, and indirect object. What we are computing is the verb de, and the verb be. And the verb be is the addressee, the licensee, the grantee. So those terms are actually, if you think about it, if we have a sentence, the verb is always the subject. And who or what is the verb? If Alex is interviewing me, then he is the interviewer, and I am the interviewed, or the interviewee, as English does. And actually, I figured out the rule why English says interviewee instead of the interviewed person. It is because when a direct object or a verb is human, it looks to the native speaker as an indirect object. So the interviewed person looks to the regular speaker or to any speaker very similar to the person, to the addressee. And the addressee is the person to whom you send the letter. So I explained that, and we don't have time for that. But the explanation is this. If mom prepared dinner, so if it is true that mom prepared dinner, it is necessarily true that mom is the preparer and that dinner was prepared. So dinner was prepared is the passive voice or someone preparing dinner. And passive voice is an entailment. And that means that is necessarily true. So not all sentences in all languages allow passive voice. But if there is a sentence in any language which allows passive voice, then the sentence in passive voice is necessarily true if the active voice is true. So that is actually the fundamentally simple logic of language. People buy cars. Cars do not buy people. And that answers a question that has been asked by linguists many times. The last time that I remember was a researcher at Stanford, and he asked that question more or less in those terms. Why cannot we swap around the subject and direct object of many sentences or countless sentences? And the answer is in the two fundamental inferences that allows the speakers of all the languages to know who is doing what to whom. So, and those inferences are that if mom prepared dinner, then mom is the preparer. And that's why speakers of all languages say that people prepare dinner. And no speaker of any language says that dinner prepare people. Actually, you might say that in a loose way, but if I change the verb to cook, people cooked meals. Meals do not cook
People.
Okay, so that is the fundamentally simple logic of language. So to kind of to answer the question, the speakers are computing those two inferences. The verb inferences, if someone prepared dinner, the someone is the preparer, and dinner is the preparer. So the first one, someone is the preparer, or mom is the preparer, or that is the verb inference. And the verb inference is dinner was prepared, passive voice. Now, that is subject and direct object there. And that explains why without, actually the child goes to kindergarten knowing subject, direct object, and indirect object, not those terms. But they don't mess them around, or they don't mess them up. You see how I am correcting myself here, because that is part of the language. So I figured that out and I began teaching. And it took 14 years for that book to be published because it was very new. I got reviews of the book or articles saying, and who proposed that thing of verb and verb? Nobody has proposed that. I was the one proposing them, but since they didn't come, that proposal didn't come from a big university, they did not believe me. It took me 14 years to publish the book. It finally came out. And the other books, actually, Routledge has published already 4 of my books. And every time it's easier and easier because it should change the way languages are taught. It's going to make, as you said, it's going to be from 100 to 1,000 times easier. And I have data and evidence to back up that statement. So it is simply doing your job well done. That's the
secret.
That is the secret.
But there's no secret.
It is the sweat. You do the work and you do it with your heart. Mm-hmm. You do it with love. So those books are the result of love. Are the result of you doing your job. Because the first thing that one of the many things that I tell my students is, you need to find a job when you wake up and you want to get out of bed and go to work. Mm-hmm. And that's what I've been doing for my life.
I think that's a beautiful note to end it on. Professor González, thank you so much for coming on the show and taking all the time. I've always valued what you've said, what you've taught, and valued you as a person. So I'm thankful to have the opportunity to have taken your class and write an honors thesis with you. So if you want the last word, I think you should say your catchphrase real quick. Sweet.
Sweet.
Thank you. Signing off.